Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark here for Leadership Conversations. This is the show where we talk about leadership according to the world that matters to you. And I wanted to briefly talk with you about 5 ways online collaboration can help your nonprofit succeed. Now, that topic is a little taboo because in a lot of nonprofits, we notice that nonprofits have a culture of not wanting to collaborate online or even work remotely. And if you mention that your nonprofit does work remotely, um, people look at you strange because it's just not normal in the nonprofit culture as of the date of this recording. But Kathleen Turner she's a digital marketing specialist, wrote an article about this. And I think that she kind of hits it on the head when she talks about how nonprofits can collaborate successfully. And here are the 5 things that she mentions. The first thing she mentions is to develop community partnerships. Now, at the end of the day, working together, working collaboratively requires you to build a community with the people that you serve with. And if you're unable to do that online, then what you'll find is that your teams will be disjointed. There will be a huge disconnect between you and your teams, and you will almost always blame it on the fact that you can't see them physically or you can't be in the same space. The truth is, that's not true. The brokenness between organizations and the lack of collaboration, the lack of communication, the lack of connectedness has absolutely nothing to do with the online presence or the lack of physical presence you have with your team. The reason I know this is because if you look at other organizations or other businesses or marketplaces that work remotely, they have to do this all the time due to geographic constraints, budgetary constraints, technological constraints, consumer constraints, etc. And if that is true, then that means that nonprofits are dealing with some of the same constraints and have to do a better job exploring how to work collaboratively online. And so she starts off by saying that number one, we need to have a community of partnerships that allows us to feel like we are connected together. So that may mean creating a group message box. That may mean creating a group email chain. That may mean creating a group video chat chain. And the interesting thing is, at the end of the day, some of these practices, a lot of us we are engaged in anyway. When you think about you want to quickly communicate with folks on your team in your nonprofit, and text message is a way, and you got to communicate with a handful of folks at the same time. Most of us create a group chat, a group text message, and we send it out. And depending on the tight knit nature of the relationship, that text message is more than enough to communicate thought, and it doesn't feel like you're disconnected. In fact, people tend to appreciate the fact that you sent a quick text to say, "Hey, I'm going to be late. Got to take the kid to the doctor. Just got out of a meeting that ran over. We need to talk about what we just discovered from one of our partners, etc." That text message is an example of creating a community partnership. Number two, what Kathleen talks about is creating internal efficiency. You have to have the discipline of efficient behaviors and efficient movement of information and systems within your organization. For example, if your nonprofit has not upgraded to develop or create its own database to track information regarding clients that are served, things that have been done to achieve programmatic outcomes, then you're clearly inefficient in the work that you're doing. Right? There's no way one your nonprofit should not have a data system. But if your nonprofit doesn't have a proper data system or lacks a data system altogether, and if you do have a data system but it's not connected or is not available to everybody in the organization, you're not being efficient. And that may be one of the reasons why you say to yourself and to your organization, we cannot work remotely, we cannot work online. And I would challenge you to rethink that. If you consider the fact that in your personal email, you have to go online to a web address to type in the web address to communicate with other people who decide to email you, you know what it feels like to have connectivity. You know what it feels like to be connected to folks through social media. You go on your phone all the time, you go on the website of your favorite social media platform, and you connect with people that you are, quote, friends with. Again, that's an example of a community partnership that you created personally. If you think about the connectivity that you express, if you think about the connectivity you express or experience with all those other platforms in your personal life, then you can see the disconnect you may be experiencing within your organization if your organization is not connected. The databases have to be connected, the email systems have to be connected, the communication chains have to be connected. You might have to go ahead and introduce video chatting for team members who may be working not necessarily across the country, maybe across town or across the state or across another region, and you have to stay in communication with them. You can't expect folks to travel back and forth when the easiest thing to do and the cheapest thing to do for your nonprofit is to have a video conference call. So that's something to consider. The next thing she talks about is having common interest groups. Now, if your organization is big enough, and even if it's not, but if it's big enough, you probably will have a number of folks who work on different projects or work in different departments. Even if you have a smaller nonprofit and your team is broken into projects based upon funding, those are interest groups. Just like when you join interest groups on your social media platform, you join interest groups when you decide to engage in a group text message. You join interest groups when you decide to get mass emails sent to you from a particular company. It's the same way within your organization. If you have two projects, Project A and Project B, and you know you have your 5 team members split up between those two projects, Project A and Project B are actually two separate interest groups. And those interest groups give you the opportunity to isolate communication just about those particular projects. As a result, it keeps out people who aren't a part of those projects. In addition, it prevents you from communicating information to people who have no interest in those projects, right? Do you see where we're going here? The interest groups allows you to isolate communication and target communication within your organization. This will prevent people from feeling like they're being overloaded with information or feeling like they're just getting way too much information that's irrelevant. And what ends up happening when people feel that way, not only will they feel overwhelmed, but they'll start to ignore emails when your name pops up, even if it's an email that is relevant to them. Now, the other thing that's mentioned here is engaging your board, making sure your board is on board with online communication strategies or remote work strategies that can make sense for your organization. When your board's on board and your board is bought into the concept of you all working remotely or you all having remote teams, then it enhances the work in and of itself. Here's the last thing that Kathleen mentions, and she mentions working with volunteers. All of our nonprofits are in need of volunteers in some way or some form. And if we start to engage volunteers successfully, we'll notice that our volunteers probably have full time jobs or have full time interests outside of our nonprofit. As a result, if that is true, if there's a merit of truth to that, our volunteers need as many flexible options as possible to ensure that they can remain engaged because people want to remain engaged even if they're busy, even if they got soccer practice with their kids and they got to take care of their ailing parent, they still want to remain engaged with your nonprofit, but they physically can't show up to every meeting or be at every event, but they may be able to video conference in, conference call in, or donate some way, somehow online instead of sending it through the mail. If you create online communication strategies, if you create the environment where your nonprofit can thrive in an environment where they don't have to physically be in the same place, your volunteers win. And not only do your volunteers win, your organization wins because you remain connected with the people who want to be connected with you. I hope you find this helpful. This is Dr. William Clark for Leadership Conversations. Like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, or subscribe to our podcast through your favorite podcast platform. Stay connected, and we'll see you guys in the next show. Peace.